Yay! Guess what today is? It's Sisters Open to Christ Kindred Spirit Podcast Day, and I am so excited to be sharing with you. I have to repeat this, Candy, because I thought it was so funny, and that is not only is Candy one of my favorite things, but Candy Pedersen is quickly becoming one of my favorite people. Candy Pedersen is a leadership and self-awareness coach dedicated to helping nurses and healthcare leaders find balance, clarity, and purpose in their careers and lives. As the founder of Heart and Backbone Leadership Coaching, she combines faith-based principles with transformational coaching to guide overwhelmed nurses from chaos to confidence. Through her work, she empowers leaders to break emotional barriers, embrace whole person well-being, and lead with love, resilience, and joy. Yay! Welcome again,
Yay!
Candy.
Thank you. So
You're-
excited to be here.
Yes, I am excited for you to be here as well. So, for the listeners, I do like to preface this just because it's important. This is Candy's second attempt with me at trying to record this, and anytime this kind of thing happens, I always see it as God's divine intervention because He thinks, Trisha, you just need a little bit more of this person, and so I am blessed to have Candy here a second time for you folks, and I am 100% certain, though I thought our first recording was phenomenal, that this will be even better. So praise Jesus for that, right?
Amen.
All right. So let's get into some questions for you, Candy. I ask this of everyone, and that is this podcast is dedicated to supporting Christian women who desire to have a deeper connection with Christ. Please share with the listeners how you think you can help them move just one step closer to a stronger relationship with Jesus.
I think one of the best things is to be intentional. Make sure that you're spending time every day, whether it's, it should be reading the Bible every day, of course, but that's one of the most obvious ones. Praying, really spending time listening. I was talking to someone about this the other day, that we spend so much time talking to God and always just verbalizing, but we forget that it's a conversation. That like I wouldn't just get on your podcast and just talk the whole time, hopefully. I would wait for you to respond and back and forth, So I think we forget that with God, that it's a conversation, and that if we give Him time and space to talk to us, that He will. And just listening for the voice of God and understanding that it's not just about us, that it's about Him and spending time with Him and being really intentional and clear on where you are in the world with Him.
Yes. Yeah, that's good. Intentionality, it's so underrated. I just feel like people don't put a lot of effort into having intentional time with anything. I think we're grazing through life at this warp speed trying to accomplish so much that we don't have the intentionality that we should, especially in cultivating our relationship with Jesus, right? Because
Right.
ultimately that's where it's at, ladies, is connecting.
Mm-hmm.
I can't agree with you more on that. Thanks for that, Candy. All right, let's talk a little bit about something that I had asked you before and I was interested in, and that was you're in the healthcare industry. Tell us a little bit about that and the idea of what does Christ-centered leadership mean to you and how it has shaped your journey.
I think that goes back to that kind of servant leadership where we're focusing so much on the other person. And I think that's where that self-awareness piece, where I do the self-awareness coaching, where that comes in play. Because when we are self-aware, we're able to give ourselves to others. We're able to spend more time looking at what others need from us and adding value to them, rather than focusing so much on, oh my gosh, what's my face doing? How do I respond to this? Because we get so wrapped up in ourselves. I think about as like roller skating, where if you've ever roller skated, you can't look at your feet when you're roller skating because you fall down. You have to stay up and you have to stay looking around at other people and where you're going, and let your feet do what your feet do. And that's that self-awareness piece where you're saying, okay, I know what I'm doing. I know who I am in God, and I can just show that love and that compassion to others, because it's so easy to get wrapped up in all the busyness and get pulled into the drama values in my company is calm in chaos. And I think that's so spiritually based, where we are that calm. We don't have to, it's just like Jesus in the storm. We don't have to be pulled into that storm. We're in the middle of it, but we're centered on Christ. And that keeps us from sinking. That keeps our eyes on God. And when our eyes are on God, we can't be pulled into that chaos and into that frustration. And people see that in you. People see that calm spirit. I've had people actually tell me, you have such a calm spirit. Well, that certainly does not come from me. My spirit is chaos and like storms all over the place, like a blizzard. But when my spirit is focused on God, I can be the center of that and not be pulled into that storm.
Yeah, that's good. I think it makes it so much easier when you think of all of that as leaping into your faith journey, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
you're always at a place where you're always going to come up against situations where you are in chaos, and I think ultimately when you have that foundation, a good Christ-centered leadership role, it helps you to develop not only as an individual and your walk with God, but it helps for you to be, like you were saying, that example of Jesus. So you're just showing him, and it doesn't necessarily have to be shoving God down someone's throat when you are
Mm-hmm.
actually just exuding Jesus, which the idea of, yeah, I agree with you, just the word calm, it absolutely terrifies me. I'm like, what? You do that? So yeah, I mean, it's like a 4-letter word to me. I kid you not. It's just like, oh, calm. And my husband says calm down, and I light up like a fire.
Oh yeah.
You know what I'm saying? That's just I'm like, whoa, I don't know what you were thinking right there, brother. That'd be fighting words. But when you can experience that, when you can, I have in my walk, I most definitely have, because there have been times where, yes, that firecracker was like, just I could see the embers burning, waiting to spark off like a pop, but God's been like, girl, take a breath.
Mm-hmm.
And I have recently taken such a real liking to the concept of breathing.
Yes.
I don't think we really have an understanding of how valuable is, that God has given that to us as an opportunity to really calm yourself in chaos. And I have jokingly said recently a lot, just breathing in Jesus, blowing out the ugly. Mostly, it's not a lot of good in there when I'm breathing out. It's
Uh-huh.
all right. Can you share a time when you had to take a stand for what was right, even at great personal or professional cost?
When we were looking to move back up, I applied for this job and I was like, okay, I don't want it. I talked to God and I was like, listen, I know I applied for this job and I know I said I wanted it, but I really I really don't. And I'd really rather not go. I'm pretty good. I'm comfortable. I'm happy where I am. And he said, and this was the biggest encounter I've ever had with Jesus in the spirit, that it was almost audible, where I could hear him speaking to me. And he was like, no, I created you for something greater than this. I told you that I have more for you. Yes, you're comfortable. Yes, you are good where you are, but having to step out of that step of faith, that stepping out of the boat, where
Yeah.
it's like, I know that's the right thing. And all of my flesh and all of my family and everyone I knew pretty much told me, like, you sure that's what you want to do? And everybody was saying, like, this is because it was 2022. So it was right basically at the end of the pandemic, where housing cost was going up, everything, like, it made no sense. We had a
Yeah.
low interest on our house payment. We had all of these things settled. We had family where we were. We had everything that people want and people are seeking. We had that. We were good. We were comfortable. We were happy. But we kept this pulling and this prompting of like, no, you need to step out. And just seeing those steps where, okay, we moved, I took on this new role. Now I took on this new company, started my own company, and all of those things that fell into place that would have never happened where I was in that place of comfort. And I think when we think of doing what's right, we think of not doing what's wrong, you know? So
Right.
sometimes it's right versus right. And sometimes those are the hardest things where like both options are good. You could
Right.
be happy and be comfortable and be successful in both of those options, but which one's going to keep you closer to God? And that one is always the right one. What the one that pulls you into that place of uncomfortable where you're like, "Oh man, the more uncomfortable you are, the closer you are to God."
Yes.
Because he
Yes.
doesn't want you stuck in that comfort of, just staying and playing. He wants you to go and grow.
Love it. Go and
And
grow.
that was hard. It was definitely one of the hardest things I've ever done and done with our family. We have little kids, so having to have them move and transition schools but knowing all along like this is where God has called us to be made it so much more. It was still so hard, but we had that purpose and that mission, and it always
Yeah.
comes back to those values. Like what are my values, and staying true to those things will always keep you going in that true north direction. It's
Yes.
huge.
Yes. So huge. How long did it take you to realize the fruit of your decision to follow God's prompting? Because I think
I
that's a
would
big deal. Sometimes it's quick, and sometimes it takes years for it to make sense. So I'm just,
for me probably a solid year,
yeah.
because my family, they're the more outgoing, like just friendly types, and I'm more the like reserved, kind of feel things out a little bit before I really jump in. I'm getting better and pushing through those
I would not
difficult.
have defined you like that, Candy. So
I
that's
know. Well,
interesting.
it's true. It's funny when you go, and this is a little off topic, but when you go back to who you were, like where
Yeah.
you were before, it's
Yeah.
almost like the reverse of like that frog in the pot. How do you cook a frog? You put him in the cold water, turn on the heat, and he doesn't realize the heat's rising. You go back, it's almost like the reverse where the boiling water hits you and you're like, "Whoa." I am not the same person that I was 2 years ago. And you don't realize that growth until you see it. But
Yeah. Yeah.
for me, it was a pretty solid year, and stepping into a new position, a new town, new church, new everything. I'm
Yeah.
like, I won't say I regretted my decisions. Regret is a strong word, but I strongly questioned them,
Yeah.
where I was like, my goodness, I could have,
This is
I'm
scary.
really struggling and I don't have any friends here. And,
Yeah.
it took some time. I think we still knew we were where we were supposed to be, but that time of transition where it was like you could really start to see the fruits and like the connections that I've made since I've been here. If I didn't have those, I would not be on this podcast right now. I would not have made the steps to develop and change and grow and do what I needed to do to start this business and get it going. So
Awesome.
huge.
Very huge. That is so pivotal for people to grasp, and it sometimes it's not easy to really let that sink in, I guess is the word I'm looking for. I think so frequently it we want these, again, it goes back to instant gratification that so many people struggle with. So if you're not seeing the fruits right away, we women become emotional. We go the wrong direction, right? We're
Yes.
like, oh, this is woe with me. I don't have any friends. I'm never going to get out of this funk. And, we are so
Uh-huh.
wrapped up in that moment that we begin to have regret or start to question God, which I don't know about you, girl, but every time I go asking questions, I am like, oof, didn't like that answer.
Yeah.
It's like I should have just stayed back and let him do his thing. He knows better than me. I didn't need to question. So, what those questions that you're like, how are you going to make this work, God? And when am I going to get over this?
Mm,
Or not too long ago, I think we might have even touched on this when we spoke before about don't ask for patience, that kind of thing, because you're going to get opportunities to be tested, and Yes, those times come quite frequently. And I think that becomes part of personal growth too, Candy. I think,
Mhm.
like you were saying that you grew so much from the experience, and it is fun when you can um finally have those aha moments, right? When you're like, "Oh, this is why." Okay, great. Thanks, God. Um just takes so much hard it's so much harder for us as I think women more so than men, but I'm a little biased because, I am one. But I I I mean,
I kind of
but
want
I
that
think
Prime membership.
that's that's right.
Just get my responses in 2 days,
That's
please.
that's right. That's right. Absolutely. I got things to do and I'd like to move on to the next item on the plate. you know. All right, let's go on to another question. How can Christian leaders hold people accountable in a way that reflects both truth and love? I like that
So
question.
that's the core of my heart and backbone leadership coaching.
Mhm.
So that heart, having that compassion and that love for that person, I feel like that has to come first. You
Yeah.
have to get to know them. You have to know, spend some time with them, whether it's all the time or if it's, say, you have to coach someone or counsel someone, ask them first, like, tell me what happened, tell me what's going on. And that really connects with their heart, and you want to understand them, because most people want to do a good job. I think I can say that
Sure.
as a generality. With most people, they want to go to work, they want to do a good job, and they want to go home feeling like they did something bigger than themselves. But at the same time, that's where that backbone comes in, where you say, look, I love you, I care about you. Here's what we need to do to move forward. Here's how we need to make this work together. And I think that's such a biblical principle, where Jesus didn't say shame on you and criticize them. He would talk to them, and he would, like, I think about the adulteress, the woman at the well, where he's like talking to her and has a dialogue with her. He's not just like, he knew all the things she'd done
Sure.
and that she had many husbands and all of that, but
Right.
he didn't bring that up first. He connected with her on a deeper level, and then he was able to say, go and sin no more, because he connected. If he would have said, hey, you horrible sinner, and then um she wouldn't have connected, she would have pushed against it. So I think we need to do that as leaders, is connect with them, and then we're able to really influence them in a way that's going to be impactful moving forward. But we spend so much time talking and not listening that we can't connect with people, and then we're frustrated because no one listened to us, but we didn't take the time to connect with them and understand their perspective.
And that is actually something that is extremely biblical, and it is something that can be adapted to not just leadership roles but all relationships.
Oh, absolutely.
And I just need you to know that though this has been our second recording, I just had a bit of an aha moment. And truth is backbone. Love is heart. So heart and backbone. It's like all making sense now. I was like, oh my gosh, it's like this epiphany. I'm like, oh, shit. So you were probably meaning for that to be intended earlier in our conversation.
It's
But
good
I
to
did.
know it takes time to understand, so that I can be aware of that in the future. That's good.
That's everyone else needs to know the connection as you share that in the future. I mean, it makes perfectly good sense. It was great. That was so good. And one of the things that I did take a note on as you were speaking was the the idea of a good leader has to be relatable. You
Yes.
have to be able to have that kind of um, connection to someone that causes them to feel comfort in you, because
Mhm.
that is hands down exactly what how Jesus's ministry was from the beginning to the end. And I think there's a lot of areas we can fall short in, but showing love and compassion really isn't the place to do it. I mean, if you're going to miss out on the mark, don't let it be in showing compassion and love to people. And as a
Amen.
leader, I think it's really hard to not to miss that mark and expect your those whom you lead to be in good frame of mind, number one, as well as having a desire to meet your expectations.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if you desire someone to come alongside you and learn, and you grow together as a leader, being in a position, just, I mean, quite frankly, I think we talked about this too. It doesn't take long for the notch to be notched down. Don't ever
Mm-hmm.
think that you're in a position where just because you're a leader, you're going to always be in a hierarchy position over someone, because there is always someone above us. And I think it's important, if we're speaking in truth and love, that we make ourselves appear, I guess I would say, probably not in authority,
Mm-hmm.
more in relationship. And I think that's how Jesus worked. And I think that's certainly the wise way to go with regards to showing leadership over someone or with someone. So we've kind of touched on this, but we're going to hit it again. What are some key biblical principles leaders should pass down to those they influence?
I do think servant leadership is one of the biggest things. Like when your staff sees you, and you have to be careful with this too, is that when you're being a servant leader, don't think of it as being a servant leader. Don't be like, look at me over here washing the dishes or taking out the
Right.
trash. Like, oh my gosh, if only someone else would have done this. Just go do it. Like I wash dishes at the office. If I see there's dishes in the sink, I will go wash them.
Yeah.
And people see that. And another thing you have to remember as a leader, whether you like it or not, they are already watching you. You don't have to announce yourself or make a big deal about things, because they're already on top of it. And if you're down in the dumps and you're not being that calm in chaos, you don't have to say it. They know it already. So just remembering that people are watching you, and that what you do is important, and it's more about the doing than the talking. We spend so much time talking. I mentioned that before, but I think it's so important that we aren't spending all the time talking, that we're spending just as much time listening, if not more, and then responding well.
Yeah.
Because that's one of the things that I think Jesus, I mean, obviously Jesus is our example, but Jesus did this really well, and left a really great example for us. He listened and he responded in love, but also with strength. He wasn't like, we swing one way or the other, where we're like, oh, we have to have this tough exterior all the time. We can't share ourselves personally with the people that we work with, because if we do, they'll see that as a sign of weakness. But be a little vulnerable. That when we're trying to lead everything so hard, that our ego is what's driving that. And that ego is driven by our fear, because we don't want to be found out. We don't want people to know that we're struggling just like them, and we're just trying to figure this out just like them. So having a little vulnerability to say, look, I don't have all the answers. And when you ask the questions, you're going to have a better answer and a better outcome, because the people that are looking to you, they're going to have buy-in. They're going to want to follow you because they had the idea with you.
Yeah.
You're not telling them, you're asking them. And sometimes we have to tell. But most of the time, you can frame it in a way that's like, hey, I had this idea. What do you think?
Right.
Or we have this new thing we have to do. What are your thoughts? How can we implement this the best way possible? And that takes slowing down, which also takes letting go of that ego and that feeling of control, where we're saying, hey, look, I don't know. We're doing this together. It's going to be okay. Goes a long ways.
Yeah, I think that, I've written down a lot again. So one of the things that you touched on that I didn't write down was vulnerability. And, there's something so refreshing about someone being willing to air their dirty laundry right alongside you.
Mm-hmm.
And, that has been something that has been a consistent thing that God has been putting on my heart since I started in ministry, was the need for more people to be vulnerable and share their truth. And I had written that it sets a standard of truth in your actions. And when you have a standard of truth, that it is something that is expected from you, then you automatically have street cred, if you will. You know what I mean? Like you automatically have enough people know that, hey, when I go to Trisha, she's going to tell me the truth.
Mm-hmm.
And it might not be the way what I want to hear necessarily all the time, but I know it's going to be true, and it's going to be said in a way that is tailored to meeting me where I'm at, whether it be in pain or whether it be like really excited about something, or no matter where. And that's part of, I always kind of thought of, that's also part of being a bit of a chameleon. A chameleon is adaptable. And I think part of showing love requires adaptability to where someone is at, and being willing to receive what they have to say. And when when you went into talking about listening, I'm like, oh girl, I have this conversation on what I believe is daily with my 7-year-old granddaughter. And I get that your leadership coaching is not for grandmothers and 7-year-olds, but I think it's adaptable because
Absolutely.
so one of the things I have been saying to her on the regular, why do you think God gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth, sweetheart? We're supposed to listen twice as much as we talk, you know? And that's a really hard concept for her, and it's a very hard concept for me. So her situation is very relatable for me. So it is a conversation we have quite frequently. But there is some truth in that. And there's some truth in that in with regards to leadership, right? Because if you are doing talking, you're really only blowing smoke, because it does go back to trying to show control over the situation, as opposed to really getting to the heart of someone's their pain, their joy, whatever emotion they're experiencing. Because ultimately, when you can figure out what emotion is being triggered in someone, it's like you have a whole new palette to paint with. It just makes it so much easier when you are able to get someone on board with you, from an emotional perspective. You're not going to get that with just truth.
No.
So, all right, I got some more questions. Well, not very many. You're good. It's not going to be too. I think I have some more questions.
Yay.
I do have some more questions. Hold up. All right. Okay, here we go. I truly believe there is great value in servanthood. Jesus washed the disciples' feet. In your opinion, what does servant leadership look like in today's world, and how can it be just as effective as Jesus' example of washing feet? Now, you kind of already touched on that. That's why I was like, maybe I don't have, but I'd still like to get deeper into servanthood, because I think it's kind of an imperative paradox to everything else we've been talking about.
Mm-hmm.
And at some point in time, Candy, you got to use the word trajectory again, because
Oh, that's right.
our
Trajectory.
yes,
I don't even remember how I
find that
used
in
that
there
before.
somewhere, because
I gotta throw it in there. Okay,
yes,
here we go.
no pressure.
No pressure. So I think with servant leadership, it's so much more, because like it's not a checkbox. It's not a thing where we can say, okay, I'm a servant leader now. It's a heart thing, and it's an ongoing heart thing. It's not an event.
Yes.
But when we are constantly working on our hearts, it sets us on that positive trajectory of being able to show that servanthood more and more, where we're really embodying that Christ-like leadership that we want to have. Because it's so easy to get sucked into the idea of, well, I need to help, or I need people to see me doing this, or I need I need something, some special event or whatever. We get too wrapped up in like checking the box of so many things in leadership. Oh, I need my one-on-ones. I need to have so many meetings, because if I'm not in meetings all the time, then how in the world am I leading anyone? So we make more and more meetings, and we make more and more just check boxes of things, and we're not really being effective. We're being busy, but we're not really being effective. So focusing back on your people, because I think it has to be people first leadership. I
Yes.
mean, when you're Christian, God first, having that center, but then really focusing on your people, because that's why you're there.
Yeah.
It is about them. And we get so frustrated, and you get with another leader and you're like, oh my gosh, my assistant, or oh my gosh, I'm in healthcare, so these nurses drive me crazy, and these physical therapists always think they know everything, or whatever. But we get so wrapped up in like talking crap about our people, really, and not focusing on what's really important, that we're there to guide them. And if we're talking crap about them, it reflects on us.
Right. Right.
It's you that owns that mess. And
Yeah.
if all you do is talk about them, you're not helping them, you're not pulling them along, you're not influencing them, and they know it. If you're talking about them behind their back, they know it. They may not know it like cognitively, but they know it subconsciously. You want a leader who's going to lift you up when you're in a room you're not in, not a leader who's going to tear you down in that room. So
Yeah.
be that leader who's going to bring those people along. And
Yeah.
that's servanthood to the max. That's not works, that's heart.
Yes. Agreed. Very good. Couple of things. Well, kudos to the trajectory. That's my go-to.
Yeah.
And on our last
I love
interview,
that.
I was so excited that she used that word, because she was like the first person I've interviewed that used that word, and I use it pretty much every time every chance I get. So, thank you for getting that in there again. Now, a couple of notes. So, one of the things that I had written down earlier when we were talking about servanthood, and I struggle with this, I got to be honest, is servant leadership is doing it without asking for attention. Servanthood is you know doing something without expecting something in return, and that is an area that I must admit, considering we've already discussed vulnerability, I might as well come clean. It's an area I struggle, and I love to give. I am a giver by nature. It fills me up so much to serve, but there are times where I really struggle with not getting it reciprocated. Like, I think I do something, and it's not like I gotta go, hey, look at me, I did this. But at the same time, I'm like, come on, God, I just did this. How come they're not doing the same for me? And I think that certainly has never been Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
And he is working so extra hard on me in that area, because it's so important to be a cheerful giver. That's so biblical. I think that's somewhere in Psalms or Proverbs. It seems very proverby.
Mm-hmm.
But we are supposed to be cheerful in our giving, and of our time, of our talents, of everything. And when you're in a leadership role, giving cheerfully should be like, I don't know, leadership 101, right? I mean, that just seems like that's the way Jesus would expect it. I also wrote down, as you were talking, gossip, because, girl, we could do a whole nother podcast on that word alone.
Yes.
And when you are, and that's a hard one for women, especially. And you could spend literally, I know for a fact I could do like a whole series on gossip and have hundreds of women willing to talk about it, because well, gosh, that'd be like talking about gossip. We love to gossip.
Gossip about gossip.
Good. Yes. So about gossiping. So I think that is something that in no way, shape, or form reflects Jesus.
Right.
And it is so hard, and it is a real challenge for women. As I've gotten older, this is a very tedious topic. I'm like, because I don't want to say the wrong thing. But as I've gotten older, I have gotten really a lot more aware of the right way to communicate in a conversation about someone else versus the wrong way. And there are times where you have to have a conversation about someone else, right? But finding
Mm-hmm.
the appropriate ways to speak, the biblical ways to speak of someone else, because Jesus certainly spoke of other people throughout the Bible. He had opinions on other people. And when you're doing it in heart and backbone, in truth and love, you are creating a different example than the norm, unfortunately. And I think it can be so life altering for not only the person listening to you when you say, look, we can't go there because that's
Mm-hmm.
out of the scope of what we need to be talking about. And I think that it's easier for us women to just go like sideways and start talking about it as opposed to being like, nope, sorry, got to cut that off. That's gossip. Because
Mm-hmm.
as someone who is in leadership and in ministry, I find it really important to bring it back every time that happens to, that's not biblical, but at the same time, you don't want to come across like you're all that, like, oh, I'm not
Mm-hmm.
going to gossip and be all like, snooty about it. So it's really, really for women in particular, a fine line there. So I, how have you been able to, um, alter that in conversations and be that example of Jesus when people begin to gossip?
Moment of vulnerability for me.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm really bad. I'm really bad about it because it's almost like it's so sneaky
Yes.
where it starts like you said, it starts out normal conversation and then you hit this wall. I am not so good at it, but I have a leader who is, and I think it partially, and not to like say we can't do it, but he's a man.
Right.
And
That
so
has something to
he's
do with
like,
it.
he just like shuts it down.
Yeah.
He's like, he'll literally, and I think this is a really good tactic where you're not going to engage.
Yeah.
Like he will just like stare off and he won't even respond. Like some
Wow.
juicy bit of tea and he just like, he's gone. And you're like,
Nice.
and it
Does he,
ruins everything.
does he walk away? Tell me he walks
This is
away.
this
Because
is no, yeah, he's still there, but he's not there. And it's so good. I've learned so much from him. And I think that's something too that we have to remember is we're all learning and all trying to figure this out and trying to be better.
yes.
Find somebody who's good at it and learn from them.
Yes.
Because just being around that environment, and he has such a good culture in his office because he won't allow it. He just shuts it down.
That's awesome.
And he takes the fun out of it. And so when it's not fun, we don't do it. And
Yeah.
so
Why? Yeah. Why? Yeah.
um
Yeah.
like the side rolls and the side eyes and stuff like that, he just doesn't engage. And so it's so helpful to me to see that in another leader where I'm like, oh, that's how you do it, because I like to connect with people, and I feel like as women especially, we just feel like we have to talk, and we have we need to just learn how to shift that into a godly perspective where we're like, I really don't want to talk about that, or I even just changing the subject to something that's life-giving is so helpful, because when we're gossiping, we're tearing down each other, but then we're also tearing down ourselves and our
Yeah.
perception of those people. It's
Yeah.
just like I never like it when people talk poorly about their spouse,
Right.
because that spouse is like they're with you all the time, and you're talking badly about them when they're not in the room, and then they're in the room and you're friends. You might have forgotten all about that the comment you made or whatever,
Right.
but your friends aren't going to forget that.
Right.
And so they look at him differently. And I think that's the same way in work or anywhere. Church is a big one where, we find out some juicy bit of tea on somebody, and then it starts this whole thing.
Wow.
And it's horrible, and it just tears people down, and it tears us down and separates us from God.
Yes, agreed. Well, I have a couple things that that popped off in my head, and one of the things I have to say right off the bat is, it's so very rare, and this sounds really bad, that I come up with a example that men do something better than us.
We'll give them credit for that. That's
And,
true.
and yes, by all means, the men really, really are significantly better at not gossiping. So we should probably take some lessons from our the men in our lives in that area, because yeah, I think that is definitely just it creates such division
Mm-hmm.
among women. And I am of the mindset, and I have always been this way. Man, if she gossiping about her, she gossiping about you too. So um I try very hard to, and I have a friend who's very good about saying that's not my story to tell. As an example, she'll say that, oh, you better ask her, that's not my story to tell. And it shuts things down pretty quick.
Mm-hmm.
So that's another great example of, but check it out all together, man. Ultimately, though, as a woman, I think that would be hard to check out altogether, because we're still like listening. You
Mm-hmm.
know what I'm saying? So I'd have to literally walk away. Gotta go. Talk to you
Yeah.
later. That would be me. I would have to probably just walk away. Yeah. Um, one of the things that you had said about marriages in particular, like the women who bash on their husbands a bit, that when we realize that the reason why we have issues with our spouses is because they have to put up with us 24/7.
Yes.
You know, when you stop trying to find fault in someone else and get the big old log out of your own eye, maybe
Mm-hmm.
then can you complain about your spouses. I am not a fan of complaining about my spouse. I try to be supportive and loving and understanding during those times, but at the same time, I'm like, girl, as biblical as someone could potentially be, as close to Jesus as someone could appear to be, when they flip that and start finding fault in people and
Mm-hmm.
start complaining and gossiping about people, the light that they could have been shining for Jesus dims a significant
Yes.
amount, at least in my perspective when I'm seeing it. I lose a lot of respect for people that take gossiping and run with it.
Mm-hmm.
However, I do not want to talk all day about gossiping, which as well as I well should, because it's a good topic, but yeah, we got more things to talk about. So I do have one more question for you, Candy, and that is my go-to, my socks. So, last fun question. For those of you new to this podcast, you might not know this, but each episode has its own purchasable socks. So, last fun question, Candy. What verse will be on the bottom of your socks so we can be standing on the word of God, and why? It's a long,
Amen.
can't take
Amen.
breaths in the middle of that question.
That's right.
It's a long one.
So my verse is Ephesians 2:10. Ephesians 2:10. We are His workmanship, for created in Jesus Christ for His works, which God prepared beforehand that we should walk in them. And I love that because my husband and I have a podcast. It's called Walk It Off, and I think walking in something is different than just walking. You're being intentional, and when we understand that we're here for His works that He set up beforehand, there's so much joy and rest in that, and peace that He's got us. It's going to be okay, and as long as we're walking in those good works and that workmanship that He created for us beforehand. Another one of my favorite verses is that He knit us together in our mother's womb. And just to think that we were created just as we are in this time, like you and I live in different time zones and we're still talking to each other right now. And that
Face
just,
to
to
face.
me, and this is my second one of the day. So I was talking to someone in Canada earlier today.
So cool.
So
So cool.
it's just incredible that we're in this place. It wasn't an accident that you're here.
Right.
He has such a purpose and plan for you, and he just wants you to walk in it. That's it. Take steps forward. Um, we don't always know exactly what that next step needs to be, but even a tiny step, one little step at a time, gets us closer and closer to where he wants us in our lives. And when we're looking at leadership, it's just that those baby steps closer, knowing that you've never really arrived. We don't get to arrive until we meet him. And so
Right.
we're we're always a work in progress. We're going to make mistakes, learning from those mistakes and failures, embracing them, and just continuing to walk forward in that purpose and plan he has for you. It's going to take a lot of pressure off, because we're always trying to do things in our own power. Maybe that's just me.
No.
But we're always trying, like, I just need to know what I need to do. Well, you need to be close to him. You need to
Right.
follow his guidance and be the person he wants you to be.
Right.
All the rest of the stuff, like, not to say he doesn't care about what you do for a living, but he cares about who you are and what you're doing for a living. So
Yes.
focus on that heart of it, and
Right.
all the rest will fall into place.
Very good. Thanks, Candy. Okay. How can everybody find you? I forgot to ask you that last time. So that I was like, I can't believe I forgot to ask her all of her socials. Please share with everybody how they can find you, Candy.
Yeah, so it is just Candy Pedersen on Facebook, and I'll make sure you have that link because that's a
Yeah.
little tricky to find sometimes. There's a Heart and Backbone page. Pages just aren't as interactive as the
Yeah.
actual person, so I like that better. It's Candies_coaching on Instagram, and then Candies Coaching on YouTube, so you can find me there. On TikTok, Candies Coaching. I do a lot of videos and things like that, so love for you to follow me on there. And then it's just heartandbackbone.com. So
Okay.
you can check that out. That's my website. You can sign up for, I have a free 30-minute call, vision call. So we just talk about, where are you going? What are you doing? And see if we can help you further from there. But I really like to add a lot of value to people and meet with you. So free call, definitely get signed up for that. And you can do that on my website.
Fabulous. Thank you so much, Candy, for socking it to him yet again.
Yes, ma'am. My pleasure.
That was so much fun.